Well, Sunny will be asking.
Yes.
I never heard of it. I pretty much had people taking care of the gym over there. It was travel.
Yeah, you're on first.
Who's on first?
What's on second?
You're gonna buy another one.
Gonna buy another
Yeah,
Biggest, what do they call that? Stimulation package. He knows my He's my easy man.
I was. The only reason this type of motor, he is to run on the alcohol. Other than that, as you know, the problem is just the vent stabilizer and it still comes up. Today's fuel. You know, the kids down there took care of me, they really did. Where'd you go? Good week. Oh, yeah? Yeah, they're good kids.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Start with the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we want to change the agenda around a little bit so the fellows from the DOR can get on early and get back to Boston or wherever. So we're going to hold the minutes off until other business. Under the police chief's time, we'll also put the animal shelter item. And under other business, we'll also have possible expansion of the town offices. All right, the way it's been arranged tonight is DOR will be here approximately an hour, probably about an hour and 15 minutes. We will, they'll take 10 or 15 minutes to give us their report, and then the Board of Selectmen will ask questions, and if there's time left, we will open it up to the floor. So, from the DOR tonight, we have Mr. Rick Kingsley, and he's the Bureau Chief of Municipal Data Management, Joe Markarian. Okay, and Zach Blake. So, okay, so who's going to start?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board for inviting us out tonight. The DOR conducted a financial management review for the town of Templeton at the request of the Board of Selectmen. We delivered that report in October of 2009. Technical assistance does financial management reviews for cities and towns throughout Massachusetts, the invitation of mayors and boards of selectmen. And over the course of the last 25 years or so, we've conducted over 430 of such reports. Now, I understand that our report for the town of Templeton has caused consternation and given rise to numerous issues, and it's in our intent to address those issues. But I'd like to begin briefly by talking about exactly what a financial management review is. Financial management review is not an audit of the type performed or completed by an outside auditor, although there can be some overlap. In a financial management review, we examine the overall operation of government and how individual departments function. We review a wide range of municipal documents, including submissions to the Department of Revenue. And these typically include budgets, bylaws, warrants, personnel, and other policies. We examine financial practices and procedures, policies that guide decisions. We look to ensure that checks and balances are in place. We confirm that the town is in compliance with state laws and regulations relating to financial practices. And we review the condition of technology in town. And we examine how levels of communication and the structure of government impact operations. These are core areas of focus, but they do not create limits. We explore, and if warranted, comment on whatever circumstances, in our opinion, impact the operation of government. Our report recommendations are also prospective. They're advisory in nature. It's up to local leaders and residents of this town as to whether or not they'll be implemented. Now, that being said, our report presented many positives about Templeton's town government. The department managers and staff are knowledgeable, competent, and good at their job, and we include Scott Sawyer in that, who's an outside contractor to the town. Sound procedures are in place, and we credit the Board of Selectmen under the leadership of the current chair and the town coordinator for their achievements to this town. Their noteworthy list prompted us to include a page in the appendix of the report that outlines 5 years' worth of town-wide accomplishments. And among these included the creation of a town website, annual audits of financial statements, steps to control various costs, securing almost $4 million in grants, and I think that's been upped at this point, and orchestrating a bond rating increase. Nevertheless, as we outline in the report, Templeton is operating under difficult economic circumstances, as are most communities across the state. Officials must expect an ongoing struggle to balance future budgets, manage personnel, and administer the everyday business of government. All involved will need to work together to continue to move the town in a positive direction. As a means to better position town government to meet these challenges, we outlined a series of recommendations in the report. Primary among them is to consider the creation of a town administrative position. Templeton has experienced rapid growth over the last 10 years. And a population approaching 8,000 residents and a budget of $14 million justifies an authoritative management presence in Town Hall. By way of reference, among 67 Massachusetts towns with a population between 5 and 10,000 people, 51 of those, or 76%, have a town manager or town administrator. The current town coordinator effectively carries out many of the responsibilities normally assigned to a town administrator, but lacks the formal authority in these and many other areas. We suggest that the town upgrade to a town manager position with full appointing authority and budget development responsibilities. Under this structure, clear lines of authority would be established and department heads would report directly to the town administrator. Town administrator also implement policies by the Board of Selectmen and direct the financial management activities of the town. That person will also function as a personnel director and procurement officer. The structure would also create a more clearly defined delineation between the Board of Selectmen policy-making function and the routine day-to-day administration of town business. We recommend that, with the creation of a town administrator position, that the personnel board be eliminated. Furthermore, we recommend that elected officials be restricted from serving on other town boards and committees. These are intended to remove obstacles to a smooth and decisive government. However, they also speak to the matter of how residents want to be governed in the future. Our report recommendations are to create a town administrator position by special legislation, and make other changes through bylaw amendments. The town could also establish a government study committee with that charge over a defined period of time to evaluate municipal government and make recommendations. This is the point in time when residents in Templeton have the opportunity to determine what type of government structure they want, how they want their town to operate. Changes approved by town meeting and in a town-wide vote can be incorporated into home rule charter and submitted to the state legislature. Beyond these recommendations, we provide additional recommendations that suggest improvements specific to the departments of the accountant, treasurer, collector, and assessors. Now, I understand that our report has been criticized for comments relative to the chair of the Board of Selectmen and the town coordinator, who are spouses. Our reference to this fact has been described as personal, inappropriate, and outside the scope of a financial management review. As strongly as I can, let me state that these comments were not personal or judgments of the performance of the town coordinator or the Board of Selectmen chair. We regret that people view it that way. From our perspective, the interaction between the town coordinator and the chair of the Board of Selectmen and their status as spouses speaks to avenues of communication, the decision-making process, and the structure of government. These are commonly probed areas in our financial management reviews. Our prior reports bear that out and are available online at www.mass.gov/GLS. We tried to address these issues briefly and tactfully. Again, we regret it was received differently. With that, Rick, Joe, and I are here to answer questions that you might have relative to the review.
Let's start out with First of all, I've been advised not to discuss the contents of pages 2 and 3 of the DOR financial review, as I feel it pertains to me due to the potential of libel. Second, during my discussion with the DOR, I believe it was Mr. Blake and Debbie Wagner, I'm not sure if Joe was there. Joe, was that the day you come in late the first day?
I did come in late.
I asked about the benefits of creating a financial department that would provide for the sharing of personnel between the financial departments without the potential of conflict of interest. This would ultimately be a savings to the town. For some unknown reason, a financial department is not mentioned in the DOR report. Yet on page 14, the DOR recommends that the Board of Selectmen direct an independent compensation and classification survey. A municipal compensation and classification survey is a comprehensive report that examines wage and salary information across multiple communities. Generally, for the purposes of comparability, a wage and salary survey benchmarks given jobs against the labor market to determine competitiveness. Usually conducted across a specific region, it could be expanded to peer communities or those that share similar characteristics such as population. Total budget or equalized evaluations. Ultimately, the survey should serve to verify the town's compensation levels are well structured and consistent with pay across the region. As a starting point, we recommend that officials review the Massachusetts Municipal Association's annual salary survey. We encourage analysis developed by an outside consultant who is better positioned to be impartial. In 2002, the town of Templeton hired Human Resources Incorporated from Andover, Mass, to conduct a wage survey of surrounding towns and to formulate a wage and compensation plan for non-union personnel. Human Resources surveyed 14 different towns and formulated a wage and compensation plan for Templeton. The plan was accepted by the town at an annual town meeting. The town paid $18,000 for that report. Since 2002, the town has spent another $7,000 to update the plan and to review and update job descriptions. Totally, the town has spent approximately $25,000 to formulate the plan and to keep the plan current. The DOR recommends the town replaces its current professional study. My concern and question is this: how can the DOR ignore the creation of a financial department that has legislated to save cities and towns money, yet recommend the town tosses out a $25,000 wage and compensation plan and spend an additional $25,000 to conduct another wage survey exactly as we did in 2002? How is this considered good financial management?
I think that's excellent, what you carried out. It is a good outfit that you would hire. The recommendation was merely intended that this be an ongoing process, that you continue the efforts in reviewing not only internally the salaries between positions, but comparing that competitively to towns throughout the region. I think in the end, the benefit is there is a limited talent pool that exists. And And you want to be able to draw from that and maintain staff here in those positions. And that's merely what that recommendation is intended to offer.
I agree, but we're already doing that. We just updated the whole survey a year ago. So we can't get any more current than we are.
That's good, and I think it should just continue on an ongoing basis.
Why do you have that like you did then? We're already doing it.
Instead of policy, personnel policy.
You know, the fact of the matter is, we talk to a lot of people in a lot of interviews, and sometimes information isn't passed along. Sometimes we don't have information, and in this case, no one mentioned that these classification studies had already gone on. We learned about this earlier this week. So in that case, it's a recommendation, you're already doing it. I would say disregard the recommendation. You're already doing it, and we think that's a good thing.
So what you're saying is that your review can only be as good as the information you receive, correct?
That's true. Well,
I should hope so.
yeah.
I should hope so.
Who wants to bring?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 11, under the number 5, implement capital improvement procedures, at the end you say, despite these advances, focus on long-term capital planning appears to be wavering. In my conversations with officials, this appears largely due to the informal nature of the program, ad hoc procedures, a review process undermined by selectmen's individual agendas, and recent lack of funds. When you did the original interviews, did you speak to anyone in particular on this, or? And did you request any additional information after the initial interview?
Of course we did. At the time, I believe, we spoke with the chairman of that committee. I believe that was Julie Farrell at the time. Had additional, obviously, conversations initially with members of the Board of Selectmen related to the budget process. Capital planning is obviously part of that. We also had conversations with the town coordinator, who's part of administering that program. The recommendation is intended to offer standards that we look at as recommended practices. I acknowledge that a bylaw had been established and that there were procedures that were outlined in that. However, this is designed to strengthen those practices that you had outlined and what appeared to be in place at the time, and to strengthen communication going between that advisory board up to the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I did some investigation into the capital plan. What I found was suggested narrative from 2005 in regards to the submitted capital articles for town meeting. And they were, their suggested motions should be reviewed by concerned departments, the town moderator, town council, town accountant advisory committee, and board of selectmen. It lists all the requests that were submitted. And further on is a report submitted by the capital planning committee for fiscal year 2006, where it goes over all the submitted requests for that fiscal year. And the committee held a meeting and formulated its recommendations on Thursday, March 10th. With respect, we recommend the following improvements. It is CC to the advisory committee, town accountant, and all other departments. In other words, if there was no, like it says in the bylaw, if there was any omitted requests, those departments were notified. So, up until the last 2 or 3 years, that was being done by the town. And I don't know why you wouldn't have got this information for a full review.
Well, doesn't
I
that-
think it might have changed your recommendation for the capital plan.
Well, I would say that it would change our recommendation only to the extent that we would have said this was once done and it's no longer being done. And that, and wavering is probably a good word.
That was just 2 years, '05 and '06. I could go back further. The bylaws established.
But what
We're
about
looking at
forward?
going forward.
I mean, what is, do you have any of those for '07, '08, or '09, or '10?
You'd have to ask Ms. Farrell.
Well, we usually submit a request for information at the start of every financial management review. And
This is what was submitted for 2010.
well, as you said earlier, it's the information that we received. It wasn't
Exactly.
suggested to us in any conversations that we should be looking for anything else. We work with what we have, and I don't see, I hope you don't see this as a criticism so much as it is an offer of some guidance.
No, I'm just looking at it that you didn't get the full information. You said you got some from Ms. Farrell. I would hope, that the files are right outside the door there. I would hope that you requested from the town coordinator or somebody from the board of selectmen.
I would like to comment on that. I believe after the conversation that I had with Zach through email and in the interview, that I referred them to the town coordinator to get more information because she is the ex officio member of that board. So I don't know why that material wasn't presented by the town coordinator.
No, the emails are sent to you, Julie, requesting that information.
And I directed them to go to the town coordinator, who is the ex officio member of that board.
I think, Mr. Chair and members of the board, the point of the recommendation is to ensure that this gets done every year, that the capital plan gets published, disseminated, presented at town meetings, so that everybody knows what's in front of the town from year to year, and that gets updated every year. That's the most important thing. And if it's been set aside for a couple of years for financial reasons, I can understand that. But I think our point is, you should continue doing that every year, because people need to know from the people that put this together, how they rank projects, what the criteria are for prioritizing them, and then present them to town meeting, so that folks know what's going on.
That had been done up until
Yeah,
2006.
but our point is, it needs to be done in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you know, going
I
forward.
understand that.
Okay, that's
Exactly.
our point.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment to make, is that the advisory board, the capital planning committee, did have a number of requests every year. We've accepted those, and then we had a spreadsheet for a 5-year and a 10-year plan, which was updated. We would make our recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen would change those recommendations. Our recommendations to the Board of Selectmen were never brought forward the way it was written by capital plan. So are you saying that the capital planning committee should, whatever they submit, should go right on to town meeting and be presented to town meeting? Is that the
No,
procedure?
whatever
Okay.
procedure you establish for yourself ought to be followed,
Okay.
irrespective of what that procedure is. That's the point. The point is to have a procedure,
Have a procedure.
have a consistent procedure from year to year, have a commitment to implementing it, and as I said, be consistent from year. We're not wedded to any particular type of procedure. We just believe that there should be one that allows you to plan your capital investment correctly and
Now,
appropriately.
capital plan bylaw covers all of that specifically. And that's why I'm saying, you know, a bylaw is only as good as it's followed too.
Well, we've made no judgment on your implementing your bylaw.
And you sent a letter to the town, I believe it was September 22nd, saying that you'd be out to discuss it with the board and the town coordinator prior to its release. Is that true? Or?
You're speaking of the financial management review?
Yes.
Yeah, typically before a financial management review is issued, I offer to review the recommendations as a courtesy. Unfortunately, that didn't occur in this case. It was, it lapsed on my part for that. I apologize. It wasn't my intention to try and skirt it or any particular issue it that way. You should also be aware that the report would not be issued in a draft form that could be changed or reviewed and altered in any particular way. The report stands as it is. It's merely a courtesy that I mistakenly overlooked.
I think it could have saved a lot of hard feelings if that was done first, that's all.
I got one thing here. Has any of the Templeton state reps in the legislature contacted DOR about any part of the review? Did you, Interior, or anyone of the current personnel board in regards to the abolishment of the personnel board, in which was one of your recommendations?
I'm sorry, did any of the state rep or senator contact us about
Yes.
that recommendation?
Yes.
Not specific, I don't think, not specifically.
No, about the personnel board.
Now, also, did you contact anybody on the personnel board to interview them?
As I recall, we spoke with Jerry, who's, I believe he's the chairman of the committee, if I wasn't mistaken, or, we also, I believe that the town coordinator serves in an advisory role on that board.
I'm talking about directly about the personnel board, not because she's in another job or whatever. In fact, I believe I was on the personnel board at that time too. I wasn't.
Our recommendation on the personnel board is directly tied to the recommendation for the town administrator. In most of the communities that we've been in and we make these sort of recommendations on centralized management, we talk about that person being the personnel director. And once you have a personnel director or administrator, it becomes somewhat of a duplication of effort to have a personnel board at the same time. And we've made this recommendation in other towns. And so the feeling here was that if you have a town administrator, then there's really no need to have a personnel board. Now, we had other issues with the personnel board, which I'm sure you've read about, and those are part of the argument as well, that if you do not have a town administrator who is going to be a personnel director, then we recommended reconstituting the membership of the personnel board. We feel very strongly that it should not be made up of elected officials, nor should a personnel board be made up of people who would, in essence, be judging their co-workers. It's not a good practice. It's probably not fair to the 30, 35 people or so that are underneath this personnel bylaw. And so that's the source of our recommendation. And I agree, these are recommendations. You're free to ignore them entirely. You're free to change them or go in a different direction.
So otherwise, you're saying the town administrator would take care of all the personnel problems, is that what you're saying?
It's not uncommon for an administrator. What usually happens is with the grievances, for instance, it starts at the department. If the department head can't solve a grievance, then it moves on to the administrator before it moves further. And that an administrator would otherwise be the front person on implementing, whatever bylaw you might have.
Let me tell you, before we had this personnel board, there was a big problem. People getting raises that shouldn't get raises and other things. And then since we came out with the personnel board, everybody has been treated fairly.
Well, we're hearing that today for the first time.
I mean, I think anybody in town would say the same thing.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either.
All right,
No?
think so.
All right.
Because we go by steps and grades.
Well, you know, I think one of the key factors with a professional administrator, part of their code of ethics is that they need to treat the employees that work for them fairly and even-handedly across the board. That involves compensation, it involves promotion, it involves discipline, it involves grievances, and, you know, that's part of their code of ethics, that they have to deal with those folks. And they're essentially the head of the administrative arm of government that implements the policies that you guys set. And it's their job to make sure that people are dealt with fairly, that work for them. And it's frankly, they serve as a buffer between the political policy-making end of government and the end of government that delivers the goods, that implements that policy on a day-to-day basis.
So my question is, how is the administrator gonna be able to handle all them jobs, which the coordinator does now, plus all these other jobs? How are they gonna handle it?
Well, they do in other communities. Winchendon has a town manager, Athol has a town manager. You know, as Zach said earlier, virtually 3/4 of the communities your size have town administrators or town managers. And I know this town has grown, but you're 8,000 people now, and you've got to think about creating separation between the policy-making, political end of government and the administrative end of government, I think. And, you know, that was part of our recommendation regarding the town coordinator and the chairman of the board. And that was not meant to be personal at all. But a reasonable person, I think, when they're sitting at home over their cup of coffee in the morning, would start to have some of the questions that we raised. And we would have those questions regardless of family name. It could have been my family name, could have been Zach's family name. It had nothing to do with the making accusations about what the Skeltons were doing.
Can I ask
in
a
their
follow-up
office.
question to that?
Yes.
I can agree with what you said. If you didn't have such glowing 2 pages of how well the town has done. So you put in everything how the town has done, everything that has been good since 2004, but you want to break that team up because we talk to each other. We are married. We are
Well,
married.
you know, again,
We were married when we ran.
Yeah.
So what is the difference?
Well, I
And
think,
it's only conjecture that we talk about the town, and
Well,
she doesn't make decisions, I do,
a
here.
town, I understand, Chair. A town administrator needs to serve all members of the board fairly and evenly. And when you have a spousal relationship between one of the members of the board, a reasonable person might conclude that that cannot happen. Probably doesn't happen. You know, the town coordinator, town administrator makes policy recommendations to the board. Are these policy recommendations that are coming from the administrator or from their spouse who might be a member of the board?
But this is like the ultimate vote
Well-
of the people.
Well, you know, and there's all, even if the chairman recuses himself or herself from any vote like this, the other members of the board still know that person's relationship with their spouse, and it is personal at that level.
That's conjecture. That's not.
Well,
that's
it's
not
what a
true.
reasonable person would think.
That's not true.
Well, you know, but I think ultimately, we're not here to say what the people of Templeton should do. We've given our recommendations, our advisory opinion on what's going on here. And I think probably the best course of action for the town right now is you need to get together a committee of your best and brightest folks, people that are well-respected, people that are neutral, and put together a government study committee and figure out what you want to do. Do you want to move up the next notch or continue to be kind of a smaller town than you really are?
So you're saying that Winchendon didn't contact you people?
No, I don't think we said that at all.
They did contact you?
Yeah.
Is there anyone else?
I actually have a question. I wasn't on the Board of Selectmen during this review. I just became a member in November. But I have been informed by people that nobody from your board talked to anybody from our advisory board when you did this review. And I don't understand why, because our advisory board is like our chief financial board now. Is there any reason why they weren't addressed?
I make an effort at the beginning of our reports to interview town officials throughout government, the Board of Selectmen Advisory Board, various officials in town hall. As I recollect, I reached out, didn't get any response. Whether I didn't speak to the person specifically. Nevertheless, our report needs to move forward. Now, whether or not the contribution from the advisory board would have changed any of the recommendations in here, I don't think that's the case. But again, I reached out, yeah.
Yeah, let me add to that. When we do these reviews, there are a number of committees that, what we say is that we are willing to speak to anybody who would like to be spoken to, anybody who feels like they have something to offer. We will speak to anybody who someone else feels can be of value to us. When we deal with capital improvement committees, finance committees, government study committees, we're looking to speak with the chair. We try to speak with all the selectmen, but even by telephone. But with these other committees, our practice is, and I'm exec supervisor, and there are a number of project managers, and I advise all of them to try and reach the chair of the committee, continue to make efforts to reach the chairs of these committees, but after a while, if there's no response, well, we're gonna move on. Where we've made our effort, we've done our due diligence, and if someone doesn't respond or can't respond or so, then we just move on. We don't interview all the people of all those ancillary committees.
Well, I know that the chairman of the advisory board is here, and if the people get to talk, I'm sure she's gonna speak, but she, I don't believe, was even contacted.
I would speak to that. I believe Carol, you forwarded me her I believe it was a woman.
You asked me for her.
Yeah, you forwarded me the telephone number. You know, as my memory recollects, I contacted that number several times. Didn't reach anyone, so again, I move forward.
She's here tonight, so you can find out.
I have a question. The recommendations that you made, there's primary and general, and you do that for a reason. I'm assuming you do that for a reason. Okay. So you said that the number 3 under the primary recommendations, which is to eliminate the personnel board, that's contingent if number 1 were to happen, which is to create a town administrative position. That's your recommendation.
Yeah, I believe it was Joe that spoke to this. The first 3 recommendations are more or less to be taken together.
Okay. But there's nothing to stop, like, I've toyed with the idea of doing number 2, okay? And I'm not sure how to word it as a warrant article or a bylaw. I've had input from other people who, if it's just elected officials and not appointed, that might be more acceptable to more people, because we are a small town and we tend to get the same people doing things over and over and over again.
Can you clarify what you're talking about, Julie, number 2?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, we're
Number
talking
2
about-
is prohibit elected officials from holding any other position.
Now, can I just,
Sure.
would that mean any other elected position, or would that mean any other position, period?
That's something, again, that you should decide the degree of. What we normally mean when we're talking about that is we don't think it's a good idea for elected officials to sit on other standing committees. These are permanent committees. If there's an ad hoc committee that the Board of Selectmen creates that has a certain lifespan, that has a certain goal, and once it finishes that goal and that it accomplishes its end, then that committee's going to dissolve. That's fine, we don't mind. I mean, that makes sense. There might be a certain expertise that is valuable for that committee's purpose. But in terms of standing committees, we just don't advocate that.
Because I'm actually the chairman of the recreation committee in town, but that is an appointed position, it's not a paid position, it's a free of charge thing, you know? And I've done that for years.
But you wouldn't want to give that up as something like
But I
this.
still think for selectmen to sit on other committees, that's the issue here. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you want to allow that? Do you want to do that? That's your prerogative. Our recommendation is that you move away from that. And we understand the small town aspect of that, and there is overlap, and people do serve on different committees. But in many communities do a pretty aggressive sort of recruitment program to try and get more people involved in government.
Because if I had to give up one, I'd probably give up this and stay with the rec. Not for any specific reason, other than I think that our rec commission in town, and there's a couple members in the audience tonight, in the last 5 years have just turned this town around as far as kids' events go and kids' things. I don't want that to end, and I think I would stick with that if I had to do just one. But I kind of like being up here too.
My question is, the trouble is, when you're saying this, there's a lot of times, I know for a few of the committees, even the personnel that I'm on, sometimes we don't even give enough people hardly have a forum, because we go out to people, either they do join them, they don't show up. So that's the problem, right? That's the
Well,
problem.
do you have volunteer forms? online that people can fill out if they're interested? Do you interview people before they're appointed? Do you ask them what's their level of commitment to this committee? And if they say, well, I work every night that the committee meets, say, well, this might not be the appropriate place for
We
you.
have it on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, well, I think that's an exercise. You want to get people who are committed to a committee if they're going to be appointed, and they have to understand that. If you're not going to be there at the meetings, then maybe another time.
Like I said, I bet you almost every committee we have, they have time trouble getting enough,
A quorum.
the amount of people that are on before I have a quorum.
Advisory committee, they're short two people.
Then maybe this is not a good recommendation for you. Again, it's for you, we're offering some
So
guidance.
I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that's the
No,
problem.
and we understand, when we make these recommendations,
Yeah.
we understand that there might be circumstances that we're not quite aware of.
Right.
But we're trying to create some general guidance and direction that we think would help the community.
Would that be,
Good.
would that be something you suggested forming like a government study committee?
Well, we've seen a lot of government study committees, and we usually recommend government study committees for communities that are on their way toward looking at their structure, looking at the possibility of adopting a charter, and then what this government study committee would do in our vision would do more than just we want a town administrator or we don't. It would look at relationships, it would look at committees and how they relate to each other and how people relate to each other, would establish the underpinning of government. What's really important in towns is that the structure that you function under is consistent from year to year, and it's a structure that people have confidence in, so that as elected officials and appointed officials change, people have confidence that decisions will be made in the same procedures and follow the same process every year. They will have faith that government is functioning the same way in a consistent, fair-handed way each year. And a charter, and a town administrator bylaw, or a budget process bylaw, that's the goal of those kind of bylaws. It has nothing to do with the people in office. It has to do with establishing a sound underpinning of government that'll sustain itself over time.
I'd like to go back to my original question. We talked about the human resources part of it. We didn't talk about the financial department. I don't know why. I think it's a very workable in Templeton. I think it's a money saver for us. It was never discussed.
I'm not, you know, if we had discussed it, we didn't discuss that, and I can't tell you why not. But if you had not mentioned it, I doubt very much that we would have unilaterally brought up the discussion of a finance department for this town. If you have a strong management presence in town hall, we would expect that person to be the head of a financial management team, which would be made up of your accountant, your assessor, chief assessor, when we have treasurer, collector, and so forth, that those people would meet once a month, once a quarter, and orchestrate the finances of the town, or at least be prepared for the kind of events, financial events that are coming up, and be sure the town meets its deadlines and has information and so forth. I'm not sure, when you say a finance department, you're talking about a finance director. Were you suggesting a finance director separate from an administrator?
No, we were going to make an umbrella with the accountants as the go-to person. And the reason we were going to do that, we have a part-time assistant collector and assistant treasurer.
I don't know.
If we could make that one job and go back and forth without being in conflict. And everybody in that department would have a go-to person, which would be the accountants. The accountant would make no more money. I just thought it was a win-win. It did not get discussed, so.
It did not get discussed.
That was legislation, as a matter of fact, that was prepared probably by the Department of Revenue. That was put into legislation type, so that it would be tailored to an individual town.
I'm sorry.
The only legislation I can think of regarding a finance department is the consolidated form of municipal financial administration, which is the finance director provision in the general laws, chapter 43C.
That's it,
Yeah.
that's it.
But there's-
Yeah, but that, I don't think is what you're talking about.
No,
Well, no.
I know what you're talking about, but there's two ways to do it.
Yeah.
One is what you're talking about, and the other is just an umbrella.
Yeah,
We had discussed this as a board.
I mean, I'm sure your town accountant would tell you there needs to be adequate separation between those receiving the cash and those accounting for the cash. So you need to maintain those separation of duties for your internal controls. But I think Joe was right that typically a town administrator, town manager in a town this size would have a significant amount of financial expertise and would be able to direct that department in a pretty expert way. So I think that would probably fall under the town administrator's role as well.
Linda,
Hi, I am chairman of the advisory board, and the town coordinator did inform me that you would be contacting me, and I stayed home for 2 days. There was no message ever left from anybody that anybody was trying to get a hold of me. After the time she told me that you people had left, I said, well, I was not staying home waiting for this any longer. I do feel we had some important input to the whole review. It's a financial recommendation. We do our best here at the, in Templeton, and the advisory board to help things move along, and I couldn't understand why we weren't even contacted.
Yeah.
As any kind of an input that I could have given, you
Sure.
know?
Well, I think that's terrific, first of all, that the advisory board is contributing. That's not always the case in every community, so that's good. I can say that I did get that contact information from Carol. Again, I can't remember everyone who I've ever contacted when doing these financial management reviews. I make a concerted effort to reach out to everyone. I recall doing that. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to occur. I apologize, that wasn't the case.
Just so you know, that I definitely felt we should have been part of it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've gone over on your website on other communities' reviews, and a lot of our recommendations are pretty close to a lot of other towns' recommendations, which is a standard I believe you're trying to set. So that things run the same, and I understand that too. But
Sure.
I think each town is individual as far as when it comes to that kind of, those kind of recommendations also, in my opinion.
so what you're saying is everyone that's listed on the back here was interviewed?
They were interviewed or they were part of the review process in some form.
Ian?
Yeah, I'd just like to offer, as a past advisory board chairman, that if you have an issue that you believe the board should be involved with, it's not improper for you to seek out, you know, the people that you feel as though you need to speak with. In fact, it's probably, that would be the responsible thing to do.
Well, I was under the assumption they were gonna contact me, I
And
wasn't
when they
going,
don't,
they were
so-
busy, so, and then they were gone.
Just saying, as an option, you can
Right.
contact
We
me.
have email addresses on our website
Right.
for all the employees, so,
Right.
you know. So, sorry, didn't
Oh,
happen.
that, I understand that, and if I got overlooked, that's fine, and I just wasn't, I didn't feel the place to have to push myself, you know,
Be
into your
pushy, be
review.
pushy.
You know what I mean? This is the review you're doing.
I know
so.
Zach's pushy when he calls,
Right.
because he calls people several times,
Right.
believe me, and so, you know, do the same next time.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Dennis Rich, I'd like to compliment the members of the DOR for the report that they did. I would like to hear a little bit more about how a government study committee is established and what happens with that.
Yeah, typically we would expect a government study committee to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen. In some towns, they offer the moderator positions as well to appoint. You know, we think that government studies, I don't think it should be anything less than 7, but you get around 11, it gets a little unwieldy. You would, the selectmen, this might even originate out of town meeting. The committee should be set up with a time frame within which it's expected to complete its work. It should be given a charge, a specific charge as to what's expected from them, what their work product is. It should be, there should be expectations that this committee reaches out for public input. Typically, these committees look to other towns and see what experience other towns have had in setting up their governments. They'll interview, you know, does your town administrator work? What's the difference between an administrator or a manager? Can we continue with a town coordinator under a different set of circumstances if we did a bylaw? We're not advocating any particular frame of government. We think central management is important. We think that accountability and lines of accountability and reporting relationships are important. But this committee would look at all those things. It would look at the budget process, including the budget calendar. When should revenue forecasts begin? When should departments be submitting their request for appropriations? When should the selectmen review? When should the finance committee receive? When should the town administrator have his or her role in what's transpiring? Typically, a government study committee will come up with a recommendation for bylaws. The difficulty with bylaws are that they, as easily as they are adopted, they can be amended. So if this committee does a lot of work, town meeting approves the bylaw, you've got a structure in line, and somebody decides they don't like it, well, town meeting could be influenced to change that. That doesn't create much stability. The alternatives are to put recommendations into a special act, which has the force of a charter. The third way is a charter commission, which is a longer process. It's a statutory process, usually takes about 2 years. Members of that charter commission are elected at the same time that the electorate are asked whether or not they want to have a charter commission. If you were to, backing up, if you were to go with a special act, that would go to the legislature, but it would first have to pass town meeting. So town meeting would have to approve whatever's being recommended. It would normally have to be accepted by townwide vote, in a townwide vote, whether that vote took place before or after legislative action. The legislature typically will pass these things, but they'll be looking for the town, townwide vote to approve. They'll make their approval subject to that. So everything really has to go through town meeting and go through townwide voters. But that's usually the process. It's driven by the Board of Selectmen. And I also would say that in terms of the membership of these kind of committees, it definitely makes sense to have people who are on there who are knowledgeable about municipal government. It does not make sense to have the entire members of the Board of Selectmen on the committee, or a committee that's made up of all former boards of selectmen or all former finance committee, advisory committee members. It's important to get people who also bring some fresh thinking to the table, who have analytical skills, can receive information and make some determinations as to whether things and methodologies and procedures make sense. So you want a committee that's where you have different people bringing different skill sets to the table, so that you get the most important aspect about the product of a government study committee is that it's credible. No matter what you end up with, even if it's recommendations for no changes, you want it to be a credible process, so that townspeople believe and understand the process and have faith that whatever they approve moving forward is one that was done with as much input from the public as possible. That's because if you don't have that credibility, whatever you adopt, the people who are charged with implementing that new structure will have a very hard time of it, because they won't have the confidence in the people, whether it's people in town hall, co-members of a board, or the electorate. So it's important to have a credible result. Is that okay?
This question is directed to Zach. Zach, at the December 3rd financial meeting, Mr. Columbus read a statement that said that unsolicited email took the DOR's focus off the real scope of the review and tainted the review. I was named specifically, and one of my emails unsolicited was when Mrs. Selectman's signature was stapled to another set of signatures to create a quorum. Did any of this, in your opinion or your experience, taint this review?
You're speaking from the individuals that I interviewed?
Yes.
No, absolutely not. The intention was information gathering. I took this in a whole broad view perspective, looking at moving government forward. I think it's been said a number of times here that the idea is creating formal lines of authority through a town administrator type of a position. Again, that's going through something of a government study committee is what we've sort of been advocating here today. But no, my view of different members of the board or other town officials was not skewed in any particular way by comments that were made.
Yeah.
This is directed at all three of the DOR members here. In the last 3 years, as a sewer commissioner, I've been threatened with 3 different possible lawsuits for doing my job as a sewer commissioner by the current select board.
This has nothing
Do
to do
you
with the report.
feel that this could be a reason why
This has
people
nothing to do with
in
this
town
report.
shy away from
That's why-
volunteering on the
It
boards
has
and
nothing to
committees
do with this report.
that the selectmen put forth? Sure, give me a chance to talk.
This has, your lawsuits have nothing to do with this report.
It has to do with why
And I
people
would
don't
like to-
volunteer for things in town,
Mr.
Jerry.
Chairman, let me make this easy. We're not going to respond to that.
No.
It's not why we're here. I will say that one thing that has aggravated us about our experience here in Templeton is to take our work product and use it to a person's particular advantage, to advance somebody's particular agenda. That is not the intent of our report. That is, our recommendations are to assist the town in determining where it needs to go. We have not been influenced one way or the other by anybody in terms of the conclusions that we've withdrawn to. We draw our conclusions independently and objectively, and I refuse to be drawn into any kind of agenda that anybody has moving forward. That's not the purpose of our report, and it cannot be used that way.
Mr. Chairman.
If we were down the road to go with a town administrator, is that, obviously it's gotta be a person with certain skills and knowledge, so is that an elected or is that an appointed position?
Town administrator?
Yes.
Would be an appointed position.
Appointed, just like the coordinator is.
Correct.
That town administrator, would that increase the salary over what town coordinator has to use?
Probably.
Yeah, and it would be basis on the competitiveness of the area. You know, I couldn't recall what salaries are.
Could you have an average salary for the town administrator for this area?
I don't know, what's Westminster? You're just in there. What you would look at is, say, whenever you're hiring locally, you're competing with other towns. And that's why the salary surveys are so important, so that you can compete for the best possible talent that's out there. It becomes pretty clear. It depends on what you want to pay and what qualifications you set for this person and what responsibilities you set for this person. I will say that there's a full range of responsibilities you can give to a town administrator. We know towns where town administrators have the authority of town managers because that's how the town chose to write the job description and so forth. But at the same time, you can say, well, we want to sort of start at something that's a little bit less authoritative than maybe that town, and you can see how it works and move your way up. Part of difficult part of adopting a town administrator government is establishing the relationship between the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen. Because invariably, the Board of Selectmen is being asked to relinquish some authority that it has by necessity exercised over the years. And what we're all saying is that this town, like many towns, is getting larger. Your budget's getting larger, and it may be time to start to bring somebody in or to have somebody who devotes their entire attention to running the town in an authoritative way. Your town coordinator now does a good job, as we've outlined in our report, at orchestrating town business. but there's no line authority. The departments don't report to the town coordinator. They report to a part-time board, members of whom are not here. So you can get away with that for now, but we're suggesting that looking forward, the town may want to rethink or may want to look at how it can strengthen its management.
Joe, I got a question. If you had a town administrator, what would the selectmen, what would they do?
The town administrator?
Yeah. What would the selectmen?
What would
our job?
You'd set policy.
Huh?
You'd set policy and pick the town administrator, and make sure the town administrator is doing a good job implementing this policy. So that's the, in small towns of 1, 2, 3,000 people, members of the Board of Selectmen have to swing by the DPW shed and say there's ice over on Elm Street or something. You have to be more involved because there is no management level between the board and the department heads. But you're a town of 8,000 people now. Well, I'm assuming that still goes on here. I'm assuming that you folks spend a lot of time in your job right now. Which, at your job, sitting as a member of the Board of Selectmen, a considerable amount. And a good town administrator could reduce some of that workload, make your job a little easier.
Rick, do you have any recommendation that a town this size, whether it should be a 3-man or a 5-man board?
No, I mean, I think a lot of towns have moved from 3 to 5. I think that's the trend I've seen, and 5 allows you to have more people on the board. So I think that can be a good thing. With a 3-person board, all it takes is 2 to swing the balance. So at least with a 5-member board, you need 3 people for a majority, and I think that can be a good thing. So I don't see that as a...
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to take the time to thank the DOR. I think the majority of the common citizens find it unbiased and comprehensive. And I think that the majority of the people that I've talked to that read the report agree with the findings, and they do believe that there are a number of conflicts of interest and personalities in the town that are preventing us from going forward. I'm also hoping that the DOR will disregard the letter sent by Representative Goby, as I don't know that it was solicited by any citizens in town, and I don't even think that it was properly voted on or solicited by the Board of Selectmen. So I'm not sure why she chose this moment to interfere.
There's 40 emails that weren't either sanctioned by the Board of Selectmen, so. There was another question over here.
Yeah, I have a question. As far as the town administrator, I've noticed a lot of local towns here. In some cases, when the administrator was underperforming, when they tried to delete that administrator, they ended up having to remove the administrator and then pay the rest of the contract. And I think that's a horrible thing. If the administrator is underperforming, which I don't know if it's a state law or whatever, or a town bylaw, but if they get the boot, that should be it. We shouldn't have to pay the remaining 2-year contract salary. I see this happen too many times. I've read it, it's happened in local towns around here, right next door. And, I hate to see us paying $127,000 to someone who underperforms. We want to boot them out, and yet we've got to pay them 2 years of $127,000 on a freaking contract. And that really bothers me, and I see that, and that's in the back of my head. Do I want a town administrator who certain people are going to pick, and this person might not make it? Does that mean that we, with the contract, it should be I think it should be a year-to-year contract. If you're not performing, out you go. Because I see it too many times. I've seen it in Ashland, Winchendon. I've seen it in, I think it was Tingsbury, everywhere. I mean, we don't want that. I mean, we can't afford $240,000, for someone who, and then have to hire another one on top.
So that's going to be up to...
I mean, I'm just saying, I think I've seen it fail.
Existing board. Linda, you have another question?
I reiterate actually what Sharon's saying. I don't think, when I was at special town meeting we had, There was a citizen that got up and spoke and talked about that she felt the people of Templeton have lost some of their power on being able to do what they want to do as a town, that the people have lost that power. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember in Templeton, because that's how we like the town. People like to put their input into how the town is run. And with the town administrative position, I'm not sure how much that's going to happen anymore.
Is there any more questions to the DOR?
I'd like to thank you for coming out. I appreciate this. I think this has helped generate discussion. I've had it put on the agenda numerous times, and we were not able to discuss it, so at least we're able to discuss it. Some of the recommendations, the town administrator one, there are pros and there are cons. At least now maybe the discussion can start. Maybe we can look at forming a government study committee. And I appreciate you coming out, because if you hadn't, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think that discussion could have happened. I think we're in a unique situation. And I think it's time to look at some of these things. I think not only would the Board of Selectmen have to give up some power, okay, if we went toward a town administrative form of government, but a lot of other departments and department heads would also be relinquishing some power. And I think their participation is crucial, and I think they need to feel comfortable to be able to participate in that discussion. And that's going to be up to this board whether that happens. But I thank you for coming out so that we could at least facilitate a discussion about the report. I think there's a lot of important information in here, and I appreciate your work.
Peter?
All the nights, we're the reporter. The reporter is here for everything else, and we have no reporter for the guy in the news. Why would they contact that reporter? That's for the paper.
He'll probably look at the tape, I guess.
Huh?
My guess is he's gonna look at the tape.
Well, then look at the tape.
I'm just telling you, you're looking at me like I'm supposed to know where he is. I don't have him up at the station.
All nights.
Can I just,
Is there any more questions for the DOR?
can I make a statement? I know this is really trivia, but my name is spelled wrong.
We'll correct that.
Sorry, Sal.
That's all.
You'll see a new copy online tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, there's no more questions. Joe, Zach, and Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Taking time out of your busy schedules.
You're welcome.
First of all,
Really? It was from the DOR.
Find a reporter. I noticed that, you know, I was scared myself. There's no reporter. This meeting was a Recommended the same thing. Town administrator and the that supports the argument, I think that's very good. You don't want to give up people just don't want to give up the power. Of course. Like when you that's why rules can't get along with it. Double bird, is it? He is, yeah. But you know he's not a dummy. No, he isn't. Sure he Did you get that email? I know, someplace where they have a lot of snow. Somebody calls and reported it. Guys sitting there with the engine running behind the wheel, not missing front. So, God bless us.
Back to business. Chief, where you going?
I'm gonna have to find a reporter.
Good evening. Couple of things on my report that we need to address. I have my meetings list. The department did its annual CPR and first aid training. We do it annually. In regards to appointments, as the board or many of the board members know, the department is currently 3 officers down due to injury. 2 are injured on duty injuries and 1 is a non-injury on duty injury. We have Officer Rosengren who was out. He's been cleared to come back on February 5th. We have Paul Schwartz, Sergeant Schwartz, who's been out injured. He has an injury. He's going to be out a lengthy period of time. In light of that, I would like to make an acting sergeant appointment. And that is done through the seniority list on the department, so I would like to recommend to the board that we appoint Derek Hall as acting sergeant, and that appointment would run through tonight to, well, from February 1st, that's when we would do, we have to do a shift bid by the union, until June 30th, and at that time, depending on the return of Sergeant Schwartz, which I do not expect to be any sooner than that, I may reappoint the acting position again for a period of months, depending on where he stands. I think that would take that's going to require a vote of the board.
You think he's going to be on June 30th?
It's hard to say. But yes, he'll go at least till June 30th would be my guess. His injuries are going to require some rehab and stuff like that, so I can't really get into it for a moment, but I do believe it'll extend beyond that period, yes.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Detective Derek Hall to sergeant until from February 1st until June 30th of 2010.
Move to seconded to appoint Detective Derek Hall to the acting position of sergeant from 2/1/210 to June 30, 210.
Subject to pending the return of Sergeant Schwab.
Well, you'll have to bring this back before the 30th.
If Sergeant Stewart comes back prior to that, we would have to
Bring it back, right.
Now, this is the only, he would be the acting sergeant, we only have one now.
Right, we'll have Sergeant Bennett now, he would make the second one, and it's only pending. Now, if Sergeant Schwartz were to go out permanently, we would post an exam. He would stay acting until that exam would be open for the rest of the time.
Any other discussion? All in favor, Bob?
Yes. Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And yes.
Just, follow-up note on that. By doing this appointment, it creates movement within the department. It kind of, everybody's shift is gonna move a little bit. So instead of the same guys working with the same guys every night, now it's gonna shift left or right a little bit. And it's a little bit of a shake-up for the department, but it's a positive thing. So it's, a lot of times we get locked into our shifts and positions because of seniority. This gives us a little bit of flexibility, so.
Will he continue doing the detective work too?
He will not. He will, that'll go to bid, and that's appointed by me, depending on who bids it. And then that person will be supervised by Derek and myself, the new, and it would just be, again, temporary. And again, it creates some, and it also shows interest in who might be looking to take that position. Second appointment, we did interviews for our dispatchers. We're gonna be losing 2 of our part-time dispatchers. One of them is Walter Scott. He is retiring from the railroad. And apparently, as part of the condition of the railroad, when you retire, you can't retain part-time jobs that you've already been in. Walter has been with us a number of years, so he will be retiring and will no longer be able to dispatch by the end of February. So, and we have another dispatcher, Erica Smith, who is expecting to accept outside employment out of the area, also by the end of the month, so I need to increase my part-time dispatch staff. We put on one approximately 2 months ago. This gentleman, he lives in town, he's going to the mountain, he's got a lot of police background, he's a gardener, explorer, police explorer. We've looked at him, we've done a background on him, he's scheduled for his interview, for his medical, and we want to get him started in a training mode pretty much as soon as we can.
Is this the one that you talked about the personnel board, or no?
Excuse me?
Is this the appointment we talked about? The
No, this
personnel
is a new
board?
one.
No, new one.
This is the second one. We interviewed several, and this is an add-on from that. So Matthew Zimke, like I said, he's a town resident, he's very interested in dispatching. And same thing, I would move that he be appointed from now until June 30th, and at that point in time, depending on his training, we would elect to reappoint him. And he's scheduled for his medical exam Thursday. That will be pending passing his medical.
And that's still June 30th, part-time?
Part-time, correct.
And we need a vote on that also.
Yes.
I make a motion that we appoint Matthew Zimke, part-time dispatcher, pending his physical medical exam from 1/11/2010 to June 30, 2010.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to appoint Mr. Zimke as a part-time dispatch position pending medical exam. The appointment will run from 1/11/10 to June 30, 2010. Is there any discussion?
I just have a question. Those people that apply for these jobs, does the town require a query report on them?
No, sir.
They do? Okay, that's good.
Okay, roll call, Bob?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And yes.
Okay, department analysis for the month, we had 8 arrests, 97 for the year. Incidents investigations, 21 for the month, 323 for the year. Citations, 109 for the month, total of 980 citations for the year. Restraining orders, 1, total of 38 for the month. Calls for service, 556. Police department handled 6,046 calls last year, and dispatched 919 calls, and dispatch center handled 10,212 calls, 12-month calendar year. Just on a final note, we expect delivery of our new SUV hopefully by the end of the week. I had the radios brought down for today to be installed, and they're assembling the equipment.
Will you get an SUV or
Yeah, an SUV, it'd be a Ford Explorer.
Oh, that's
It'd be a Mark Ford.
Oh, that's right.
It's going to be
That's
replacing the
That's right, that's
2003.
right.
They voted to give down.
That's right.
That's the one that's going to
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So hopefully that will be in by the end of the week.
Yes.
At the beginning of your report, you said you had 3 officers out, and you only mentioned 2.
Okay, one of them is a non-related police injury. Okay.
Oh, you told us about Brian.
Okay, Brian, I have Eric Smith, who is
Oh, okay.
on IOD injury. He fell on the ice and has an injury. He's scheduled for doctor's appointment, a second doctor's appointment next year. Looks like he'll have to have an MRI for him. We don't know where that's going yet, so. But that is job related also.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? We do have a couple, is the dog on?
Yes.
Yes, okay. She snuck in behind me. I know she had a couple issues she wanted to bring up. Go ahead.
I'd like to do a fundraiser for the animal shelter. To start on a pet 2011 calendar contest. Funds will go towards paying for medical bills for the animal. We'll be advertising through newspapers. This is what I'd like to do. I'd like your blessing. Would advertise through newspapers, town websites, in Templeton, Hubbardston, emails to all the adopters who adopt an animal through our shared shelter. Also mailings to all licensed dog owners in Templeton and Hubbardston. So basically, this would be a calendar that would have the animals that have been adopted through the shelter and pets that are owned by residents in Templeton and Hubbardston. The rules of the contest would be, since there's 12 months in the calendar, there'll be 12 winners. Their pet will be chosen for the cover of each month, and they'll win a free calendar. All other entries will be posted on a particular day of the month. So if you don't win, your animal will be selected on a particular day of the month. Contest entry fee is $20, which will include 1 copy of the calendar. Calendars will be sold for $20 each. And what people would do is submit a photo in a JPEG or a bitmap format and email it to the animal control's email, along with a contest form of your name, your pet's name, and the date and the month that you would like your pet to be put on. All photos will become property of the animal shelter. And there's a clause here that there is no guarantee that a submitted photo will be published in the calendar. We'll do our best to include your pet, provided there is space available in the calendar. Deadline for the contest submissions is to be announced. So this is something that's kind of fun to do, that will raise money to pay medical bills for the animals. And this is something, I would just like your blessing, for us to do.
What do you think this will be? Like,
Well, I'm hoping, I'm sort of guessing maybe the contest, the deadline would be around August. That'll give us 2 months to put everything together in the calendar. There's a company that you can download the software package for free, design it, you're on your own, and submit it, and they'll just print it for you.
so you have it before Christmas?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm hoping, because there's some fairs in the fall, and we'd like to set up tables and sell them at fairs.
August is when they have that one up here.
The final school?
No, the arts and crafts is in August, last week in August. isn't
Oh, it
it?
is?
It's usually the
Third weekend.
Third
weekend.
Third week in August.
You usually have your shelter up there at
Yeah.
the church for that.
Yeah, we do.
Plus you have the one at the school.
Well, if we get going on it now, we could get an earlier deadline and then get it to print and start selling them earlier. Yeah.
I have no.
Jared?
I have no problem.
Can we get a copy of that? You read different numbers than I have here.
Is this what you did?
He said,
Okay, 'cause, yeah, I have
$20.
donation of $5, calendars that cost 12 on my little,
Yeah.
so it's 20 and 20.
So the donation fee is 20,
20 donation.
and the calendar's still gonna be 12?
20.
No, 20.
20 for
"Twenty,
calendar.
20 for both."
Both.
And it says 5 and 12 on our sheet.
Yeah.
Do you have enough money up front to get this going? Like,
Well,
order?
I should, because if you submit a photo with your dog's or cat's name on it, you submit your $20 ahead of time,
Okay.
because for the contest.
How much does the
And
website?
and then there'll be a form to say how many calendars you want. So if you want 2 calendars, you'd submit $40.
Who is going to choose the winners?
I don't know.
Can I be on that committee?
People will pay $20, you're gonna hear about that.
Well, if somebody doesn't have a pet, means they're not an animal lover, so we can't do that.
But you haven't chosen a video.
No.
She's kids from the school.
Yeah.
They know, that's what she was kids.
Yeah, Sue just said that.
Yeah.
Just don't put names in the photo so there's no,
For the school,
fake
yeah.
names. Let the kid
Better
pick
do
the
this
right
calendar for the animal control.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to allow the animal control officer to conduct and do a calendar of pets. Is there any other discussion?
Good luck. Good idea.
Yes.
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Chris? Yes. And yes.
Before you give it out, talk to you about it.
Will it be a stray
I
cat?
got a copy right here.
No,
Will it be a stray cat?
I have room for your stray cat. I adopted him.
Someone's got it.
Oh, really? Good.
If he hunts moles and doesn't care about outdoors, I'll take it.
Okay, did you have anything else? Ben?
No, that's it.
Chief, did you have anything? I'm all set. Anybody have anything, Chief? Okay.
Hell of a job, Chief. Keep it up.
No, yes.
Chief
says all the time when I stop. It's all the cops.
Chief, I just have a comment. I would like to commend you and your force for the job you're doing. I noticed that they patrol, especially in the morning when kids are at their bus stops, they're patrolling very diligently around the bus stops, and I've seen them stop cars on several occasions at the stops near my house, and I think that's a good thing to do.
I will convey that to the office. Thank you very much.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, next item, we have Mr. Moen. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Mr. Moen is the president and CEO of Hayward Hospital. He's going to give us a talk on the possibility of some construction on exit 19.
Sure, where would you like me to sit or stand?
Right here.
Right in the hot
If you-
seat.
If you want to stand, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, sure, I can talk to everybody that way.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. My name is Dan Mullen. I'm the president and CEO of Hayward Hospital. And, you know, we have a very good relationship with the communities that we serve, and we very much cherish the relationship we have with the town of Templeton as well. It's a very important part of our service area. And really tonight, what I'd like to do is just more or less have a discussion with you, because we're at least contemplating the potential for additional medical office space and medical office services in Templeton. As you know, Narragansett Family Practice already has a presence here in Templeton, but we've been looking at the Exit 19 property off of Route 2 for some period of time, with the idea of potentially having some additional physician office space there. Whether it would be, you know, additional primary care or additional specialty kind of physician services. There could be some ancillary services involved, for example, a blood drawing station or basic radiography services. We haven't really made up our mind as to what would need to be there, but we know that there is certainly a growing demand for healthcare services in this area. There certainly is a need for additional physician services. We know that there's a need for more primary care physicians in the entire region. And there are certain specialty services for which people have to travel. At this point, it would be nice to be able to bring those closer to people in the community. So, again, we're not bringing any definitive plans to you tonight. We certainly wanted to express an interest in that, hear from you what the town's interest is in going forward with seeing that particular property developed. And also some feedback as to if there are particular services that people think might be needed in this area as well. As you probably all know at this point, we've got a pretty big building project going on at Hayward right now, and the good news is it's on time and under budget. So that's I keep my fingers crossed on that one every day. But obviously, we're in a situation where we're growing and trying to meet community need. And so this is really part of a dialogue about the town's interest in this type of growth,
And what we were thinking about was potentially something along the idea of, purchasing 1.5 to 2 acres of land, maybe doing something in a first phase that would be somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 square feet of office space with the potential to expand down the road if that is something that, proved to be needed and was feasible on that site. But most of the people I've talked to have said, and we agree that that is just a great site. Having that access off of Route 2, giving people the ability to access services without necessarily going, into Gardner itself would be a big plus, or to potentially have some specialty services for which people have to even travel further at this point, whether it's going into Worcester or whatever. We have been having some discussions with UMass Memorial on this as well. UMass Memorial is our clinical partner. They're our tertiary partner, and they do provide some of our specialty physician services now. So we've had some discussions with them about their interest in also having some services on the site. Again, nothing definitive at this point, but I wanted to let you know, as the elected officials in this community, that those discussions are at least happening and that there's an interest level there as well. So I think it's got the potential, to be a really interesting project, one that I think it would be great to start to see that land developed. I mean, it is a key spot, and to some degree, we would like to not sort of be the lone folks out there. It would be nice to see other development occur as well. Obviously, the recession has hit all of us. That stopped a lot of things from happening for many organizations and businesses, but it's going to start to turn around. I'm the eternal optimist, and